So today I'm going to be talking about how to properly write a romance. A lot of them get bogged down in this will they, won't they BS, and it can get pretty frustrating for your readers or viewers to consume. The fact that I'm usually not all that interested in romantic arcs and stories kind of gives me a unique perspective on this topic. For a romance arc to really pull me in, it has to satisfy one of these two conditions, preferably both. It either has to be highly dramatic in its execution, or it has to have a really interesting narrative device attached to it. Which of course brings us to the topic of our video today, how to write good romances. And our point of reference for this video essay is going to be not just my favorite game from this year, but my favorite piece of media from this year.
No!
Just letting you know that there's a minor spoiler warning here, so let's get into it. In the FF7 Remake trilogy, the characters are extremely well written, and they all have some very interesting and nuanced relationship dynamics with each other. It's to the point where you could make a really cool chart about who each individual member of the party views as their closest friend. However, this video is about romance, and the particular relationship I'm going to use for this clinic is a standout. One that is built upon mutual trust, emotional connection, honesty, and goddamn, peak drama. And that relationship is Cloud and Aerith. What, you thought I was gonna pick Tifa? Nah, they got problems, man. They have a bit of an emotional disconnect for about 70% of the story, and even after Final Fantasy VII, when there are no real obstacles to them getting together, it just never happens. None of the sequels specify the status of their relationship beyond being childhood friends, and they're just never shown to go the distance. They just don't make it. If their relationship actually went anywhere, I could actually use it as the reference point for this video, but it doesn't. So that's why we're going to be talking about Cloud and Aerith instead. The first thing we got to talk about is establishing mutual affection. When you write a romance, the characters should probably be interested in each other. While this seems like a very obvious thing to do, I felt the need to mention it because there was a popular anime a few years back that forgot to do this and then put the characters together anyway. Also, isn't it kind of funny that Cloud and Aerith's dynamic is the same as Sasuke and Sakura's in terms of their personalities, but the only real difference is that Cloud actually likes being around Aerith. Alright, yeah, I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Honestly, that deserves its own video. Anyway, when you're writing a budding romance between two characters, or an ongoing one, you have to always have an undercurrent of affection in how they behave toward one another. And more importantly, you need to be able to contrast their behavior with how they act toward other people in their circle. Watching Cloud interact with Aerith should lead you to believe that he is calm, serious, and emotional. But he only behaves that way when he's alone with Aerith. Outside of that, he's kind of a smartass, sometimes abrasive, and emotionally closed off. He's very, very stoic. Take the following scene that Cloud has with Tifa as an example.
I tried to keep it alive as long as I could, but now it's dead and buried. Like the bar, our home, and everything else. They took everything from us, again. Cloud, you're hurting me.
This is a cute scene and all, but Cloud is not emotionally present here. She can't even get him to fully drop his tough guy affectation while she's crying her eyes out. He just awkwardly hugs her back after being completely unsure on how to respond, and then he accidentally hugs her too hard because he has super strength. By comparison, the version of this scene that Cloud has with Aerith presents a very different portrayal of his character. He's much more emotionally present and sensitive.
Your mom's really worried too.
Too? So you're worried about me?
Of course I am.
I'm sorry about that. Really. You've made me more happy than you know. And I'll always cherish what you've given me. But whatever happens, you can't fall in love with me. Even if you think you have, it's not real.
Do I get a say in all this?
It's almost morning. Time to go.
I'm coming for you.
If that's what you want. Thank you.
Look how much softer he is with Aerith as opposed to Tifa. There's a lot more affection there that's kind of bubbling under the scene. And that's what you want to go for. Not necessarily a drastic change, but a notable one. You want to get across the point that the two characters are willing to show each other a side of themselves that's not normally present, something that's actually special in between the two of them. Aerith also behaves quite differently when she's alone with Cloud as compared to how she is with everyone else. She's not as emotionally open with the other party members. Aerith and Cloud as characters have a lot of pain that they're shouldering, and she's better at dealing with it than Cloud is. She recognizes this about Cloud, and in turn she tries to pull him out of his shell to help him deal with his own pain, which is based in his isolation. By comparison with the other party members, Aerith is a lot more whimsical, carefree, and silly. She doesn't get serious and emotionally intimate with anyone really outside of Cloud in one-on-one situations. Your character should have two speeds. One where they're with each other and being emotionally intimate, and then another with everyone else. So to tie this all back to how you should write it, always make sure that there is affection between your two love interests, and make sure that it's mutual and visible. It goes farther than just kissing or sexual contact. They need to behave slightly differently when they're alone together. Or alternatively, they can have inside jokes with each other, or they can express different forms of casual intimacy, like sleeping or resting near each other or wearing each other's clothing. Make your relationship make sense by showing that there's something there that is not present when they're with the other characters in your story. They have to behave ever so slightly differently when they're alone. This section directly segues from the mutual affection tenet of good romantic arc writing. This one's called mutual development, and it simply entails how both characters change one another for better or worse. Toxic romances can be very engaging. This video is just about well-written relationships, not necessarily healthy ones. But in the case of Cloud and Aerith, we are talking about a healthy one. So, with that said, they both inspire a clear and palpable change in one another. Aerith, of course, makes Cloud more emotionally open, compassionate, and selfless. In the first few hours of FF7 Remake, he's a bit of a dick. However, because of Cloud's history of being socially isolated from his peers, Aerith's kindness and inclusiveness cause Cloud to let his guard down around her. She in turn uses Cloud's moments of openness as an opportunity to get closer to him. As a result of meeting Aerith, Cloud goes from this,
"Nobody do something this crazy just for money. They may not think you're a true believer, but you know what I think?"
Not interested.
What?
You gonna stand there and pretend you can't hear the planet crying out in pain? I know you can!
You really hear that?
Damn straight I do!
Get help.
to this.
A weird, creepy monster we've seen near the hideout lately.
He wears a crown and walks around like he owns the place. If he's not a king, he's gotta be monster royalty at least. I bet a soldier could beat him up easy.
Oh yeah, real easy. But here's the thing. I don't work for free. Or cheap.
But we don't have any money.
The watch wouldn't ask for money.
I'll do it for 3 gil.
Huh?
I'm offering a special discount right now on Toad King jobs. Looks like it's your lucky day.
Awesome! Now that's my kind of bargain. The hideout is the...
Cloud decides to start using his strength to help people, and usually at no cost to them. He's doing this out of the goodness of his heart. And Aerith is the one that prompts this change within him. Aerith's change, on the other hand, is a bit more subtle. When Cloud meets her, she says the following.
You know, I thought about leaving once, but in the end, I couldn't.
Too dangerous?
Too much. A whole world bursting with life. Maybe more than I can handle, I think sometimes. Even now. People hate the steel sky, the slums, but I don't. How could I? All that passion, all those dreams, flowing and blending together into something greater.
Aerith is actually afraid to step out into the wider world and fears taking hold of her destiny. This changes, however, due to Cloud being such an attentive bodyguard that he guards her emotional safety just as fiercely as her physical safety. Aerith's got a lot going on in her life, and Cloud keeps her grounded. This in turn is why she eventually feels comfortable enough to take that leap of faith, because she has Cloud with her. She knows that he'll catch her if she falls, literally. Characters don't have to massively change in order for this tenet to be respected. Perhaps the relationship you're writing could simply be a method by which your characters find their true selves. Maybe they only add a singular trait to their personalities, and that's that. Simply put, you should show a tangible and reasonable change within the characters that are involved in the relationship you're writing. It can be good, it can be bad, or it can be something somewhere in between. Just make sure that when you look back at the beginning of the relationship, you can clearly track and recognize the shifts in their characterization as a result of being together. And that, my friends, is what we call mutual development. Now, this tenet may be a bit controversial depending on how you interpret what I'm saying, but there's a lot of merit to it if it's used properly in a story. Tenet 3, conflict. Having conflict in a relationship can actually strengthen it when it forces the two characters to grow through their disconnect. In this context, it can mean either the following. Either the characters are not always on the same page and sometimes argue with one another, or that there are elements of the overarching plot that keep them from being together. In the case of Cloud and Aerith, it's mostly the latter since their personalities are complementary, so they don't clash much, if at all, in both Remake and Rebirth. In fact, the closest they get to an actual argument is during their resolution scene in Remake. But that scene isn't really an argument, nor is it framed like one. Cloud is more hurt that Aerith is trying to keep a lid on their escalating relationship, but he refuses to go along with it, and he continues to become more serious about her in the sequel, FF7 Rebirth. To elaborate, the central conflict of Cloud and Aerith's relationship is a metaphysical struggle with fate and destiny. The remake games bring this conflict to the forefront of the narrative, as both Cloud and Aerith seem to have varying levels of awareness of what's going to happen to them. When you're writing your own characters, you should either have them disagree and be forced to work out their differences, or have circumstances drive them apart so that they must then overcome said circumstances. In the case of the latter, it's the most engaging when said circumstances are as fantastic as possible as opposed to mundane. They have to fight against something that's much bigger than emotional disconnect, or arguments, or just general relationship strife. Just remember that when you're writing your relationships, try to put some kind of friction between your two love interests, and I'm not talking about sex. Make the event of the characters getting together an actual event. They should have to work to be together. They should have to fight to be together so that the end game feels like it was earned. fourth tenet of good romances is called chemistry. When your two characters interact with each other, there should be something like an ease of connection that the two of them have. The best romances happen between two characters that aren't awkward or shy around one another. When you meet someone who's on the same wavelength as you, interacting with them should fill you with both energy and comfort. There can be a little bit of awkwardness, but it should only come up when things get really intimate, serious, or if the relationship is treading new ground. Otherwise, your two characters should share a connection that flows as freely as your thoughts do, effortlessly moving from one topic to another or transitioning smoothly through different situations. This type of interaction should demonstrate that they're both physically and emotionally in sync, and that they intuitively respond to each other's quirks and cues and all that business. It should almost be like they share a stream of consciousness where their thoughts naturally align with each other, and it allows their dialogue and actions to evolve seamlessly without any kind of forced transitions in the conversation or scene. This dynamic reveals a deep understanding and attunement between your two characters, and it's essential for depicting a genuine and profound romantic connection. Chemistry. To give examples, let's refer to the following banter between Cloud and Aerith.
Want to get to Sector 7 in style? This is the passageway for you.
So,
Go ahead.
you gonna be okay getting home?
And if I said I wasn't?
I'll go with you.
I thought you needed to get back. Don't worry. I have a backup route for emergencies, and it's safer too.
To give you some context, this happens when it comes time for Cloud and Aerith to part ways after spending just one day together. They clearly don't want to separate, and in spite of the butterflies in their stomachs and the awkwardness, Cloud is too attached to her to let his own reserved nature get in the way of their connection. He's stepping out of his comfort zone just to spend more time with Aerith, because he's not used to making himself so emotionally vulnerable in these kinds of situations. When you write a romance, the characters involved in it should have a natural synergy in how they interact, and even if there's awkwardness involved, say if your characters are teenagers or in their early 20s, like in the case of Cloud and Aerith, the desire to be together should always overpower their nervous energy. And also, they have to seamlessly bounce off of one another without any sort of break in the flow of the conversation or the scene. Take note of how Cloud and Aerith ran out of things to say and then they started lingering, and then Cloud started making up the excuse that he'd escort Aerith home. Aerith picked up on Cloud's unwillingness to part ways with her and held their connection just long enough for another excuse to allow them to continue hanging out. That's what you're going for in terms of tone and character intention when it comes to chemistry. There should be an unbreakable magnetic pull between your two love interests, and it should be seamless and feel as natural as breathing. The last tenet is called sacrifice. I won't get too much into spoilers, but I will say this. Aerith dies. Yeah, I know, but for those of you who are out of the loop, Aerith dying is like the Luke, I am your father, but for video games. It's a pop culture touchstone, and while it sucks that I had to spoil it, the Final Fantasy VII Remake games expect you to know this going in. The fact that I've spoiled this for you actually improves the experience if you decide to play the Final Fantasy VII Remake games. Relating this back to the idea of sacrifice. This is an important part of writing relationships that are kind of past the honeymoon phase. Cloud and Aerith, especially in Final Fantasy VII Rebirth, the second part of the trilogy, routinely throughout the game put each other first, far beyond the point where they'd be considered just friends. In fact, the entire finale of Final Fantasy VII Rebirth is devoted specifically to their relationship. Even though they're not officially quote-unquote dating, they clearly love each other at this point in the story, and we get to see just how far both of them are willing to go on behalf of each other. Aerith is willing to give up her life in order to save Cloud.
This isn't about me, though. It's about saving the world. And you.
And Cloud is equally committed. When you write your own romances, you need to show that the characters are willing to go above and beyond for one another, and even at potentially fatal personal cost. In the case of Cloud and Aerith, their efforts take them across time, space, and even friggin' dimensions just to be together. And that's what makes their story so powerful, especially in the Remake trilogy. There is nothing these two characters won't do for the sake of each other. And that's why their romance is so emotionally gripping, despite me personally not being all that interested in romance. It pulled me in. And you can do the same thing if you include these 5 tenets, as mentioned previously, in your own writing. If you're writing a relationship that you intend to go the distance, you have to include at least one example of each of these tenets in your romantic arc. Otherwise, it's going to feel half-baked and in the worst cases, outright laughable. Anyway, this is Evan with Merryweather Designs, and if you enjoyed this writer's workshop, leave a like. I'm an artist and a writer by trade, and this channel will cover things in the art and writing sphere, and will also include some of my own work in the form of voice comics and other things like that. So, until then, see you next time, whenever that is.